Hey everybody, it's Jeff, and today I'm going to teach you how to do breadboard ends. Keeps the table nice and flat, it's as historic as they come, and it'll up your woodworking skills. Hey, I'm Jeff Devlin of Schoolhouse Woodworking. I'm a licensed contractor, woodworker. We named our company Schoolhouse Woodworking many years ago because the goal was to teach. Wow, that's nice. It's not always the perfect method, but it's a way that I've learned over the 30 years doing this that I believe sometimes simpler is better. In our last video, we joined these four boards together. However, because of the width of each board, this can happen. See the way it bows and it flaps around? So we want rigidity to that. So what we're going to do today is we are adding a breadboard end. All of that is a piece of wood that goes perpendicular to those larger boards that holds it flatter. And there's a really tricky way and a cool way to do this. So first thing I'm going to do is take more of the same reclaimed wood, and I'm just going to cut it a little bit oversized. So, and it'll make sense in a minute as far as why I want it a little past. All right. Now, this breadboard end is a little too wide, so I'm going to cut it down on the table saw. I like my breadboard ends around 2.5 inches wide, and the reason is because the loose tenon that I'm going to use, it's about 1.5 inches into the wood. And I just think it looks better that way. Now, side note, if this isn't straight, if you are just taking a piece of wood that you bought from the store and hoping to slap it on there, it's not going to be perfectly parallel, so there's going to be inconsistencies. So go back, check out one of the videos on how to make a board nice and straight, and then that way you'll be set up for success. Because I've seen too many people start doing this, and they struggle at the simplest of things, and once you start struggling at the beginning of your project, you're going to be struggling all throughout the whole project. So right now, I'm just cutting these boards. I oversized the boards so that way I can just make them nice and straight at the end. I have this really inexpensive Jigormai speed square, and that just helps me square up the fence, or this fence. This is a track saw fence, and all of this will do is be able to cut all the way nice and straight. So now it's time to start drilling the mortises for our breadboard end. And the reason why I'm saying mortises, in the olden days, when breadboard ends first started, you didn't use a loose tenon like this, like I use all the time. You would actually have to cut out a little bit of this wood and make like one large tongue. Now you can still do that, and I'm sure at some point down the line I'll show you a video on how to do that all by hand. But using the Domino XL, this allows me, with straight cuts, make my tenons. So what I have to do is mark where those tenons will be. Now bear with me. Because this wood, now that it's really wide, and because we have each board that's wide, it will expand and contract. And you've seen it in your houses sometimes when you shut a door or something like that where it sticks. In this case, think about it. If this board expands a 1/16 of an inch when it gets, and it swells, if this board expands a 1/16 of an inch, if this board expands a 1/16 of an inch, and if this board expands a 1/16 of an inch, that is 1/4 of an inch. Whew. I was gonna have to look at my tape. No, each one will expand. So what we're gonna do is we're going to position our breadboard end so that it's going to expand this way. So that this board, this center tenon will be tight. And then each one, as you go out, will get looser and looser. So it'll allow for this larger panel to expand and contract. Truth be told, the breadboard end will not expand and contract lengthwise. It always wood expands and contracts across the grain, so this way, but it won't get longer. So what we're gonna do right now is mark for where they are. And truth be told, I'm blind as a bat, and I've got these silly new reader glass things on my head that I can't see anything. So for those of you like me, use tape, because especially on old wood, you can't really see as much. So marking on a nice piece of painter's tape makes it really, really easy. So for me, the first thing I'll do is I'll find center. I've got 38, so 19 is my center. So I'll mark center at 19. Then what I like to do is I start on the outside edge, and I always go 2 inches in from the outside, because the domino or the loose tenon will sit about there. So there's 2 inches. I'll even write it, 2 inches. Then I'll come from the other side and I'll do 2 inches. Now, depending on the width of your board, we really haven't talked about any measurements. Now, I can choose to do 1 more or 2 more. Quite honestly, 2 more might be a little much. So then I'll just take this measurement between those, which is 17. I'll split that in half. So all you're basically doing is you're splitting this into sections. So now I've marked this and I can see it really well. I can take my breadboard end and mount it right up next to it. And I'm just going to trace my measurement from the one to the other. So I'm writing the line there so you can see that those will line up. They're only really reference lines for where to drill my domino. All right, so now I can pull this off, and I've got my reference lines. So these that I will drill in now will be tight. On the domino, it allows you to be able to drill a hole that's tight and matches the exact width, and then it allows you to open that up and make it a little wider. And push. So now I've got those. Those are all very tight. Now, because we want this to expand the tabletop, we don't need this. We're not going to be able to make this expand along that length. So the first cut is going to be nice and tight. Now, you'll notice that hole is nice and tight. Now I'm going to flip the switch on the domino. I'm supposed to do it while it's working. And now, once I line it up, that's going to be a little bigger. So now what we can do, we can actually put the dominoes in each groove. All right. Because we don't want this wood to stick out here, because we want to allow it to expand and contract, you have to get rid of that glue. We don't want that glue there because we don't want anything to impede that movement. The center, technically, we're going to glue it nice and strong, but in this case, just wiping that clean so it's all no issues is the way to go. Now we're just going to set this. So before I do that, I'm going to look and say, okay, our tenon sits out about 1 3/4 inches. At 1 inch is where I'm going to put my peg. The peg is what's going to hold it. And you can see it's an extremely tight fit, which is good. Voila. And you can feel it when you hit something, you can hear it just end, which is awesome. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark from this side 1 inch where I'm going to drill my peg. But I'm going to take it from this side so it looks like it's 1.5 inches. So now, if we left this just as it is, with no glue or anything, over time it would wiggle loose. What we want to do is glue it in the center and lock it in here, right? But then allow for these to move. And how we're going to do that is we're going to drill a peg down through that tenon. So right now I've got a 3/8 dowel and a 3/8 bit. Truth be told, I like using the Forstner if it's a harder wood. If it's a softer wood, this is just much easier to run. And you're just going to keep the drill really straight, and you're drilling, I'm going all the way through, so therefore there's a hole all the way down and through. Truth be told, if you don't want the bottom to explode out on you, put a piece of wood up underneath and clamp it, so that way you don't get the tear out underneath from your drill bit. So it doesn't take a lot to be clean and safe. And you can see the difference in the wood chips from the beech to the reclaimed. They're much harder. That one I went a little off center, which isn't great. The bit jumped on me, but I'm still okay. All right. So most of you would think, hey, just run the pegs through now. But you now have tight holes on the outside. So we have to loosen those holes up. So as you guessed it, we have to take this off. Hence the reason why I left those little horns on the end. I call them horns. You can call them whatever you want. That allows me to tap this a little bit at a time. So what I have to do now is this is going to get glued. These holes, we need them to loosen them up a little bit. So we need to widen them. How I'm going to do it is by eye. I like to sight down the drill. So you already know you went straight down, right? So now what you're going to do is you're going to tilt it to the left and then to the right. And you'll notice that it elongates the hole. Then I run the drill bit to the one side and then I run it to the other. And then now you can see, let me put the drill in there. See the wiggle room? But the wiggle room isn't left to right. It's not this way. I can't move the drill left, forward and back in here. I can just move it this way. That allows for that peg to move. And it allows for the appropriate expansion and contraction. Again, same thing there. We do not want that in the center. You can get a rasp or a file. I just feel like it's much easier to do it this way. You just have to be really careful not to turn the drill too much to the left so that you elongate the hole in all directions. You just want to elongate it this way. So now it's glue time. So because we want to expand and contract off the center, we can glue the bejesus out of this center. And normally I glue, I don't know, 2-3 inches on either side. So that way we know it's not going anywhere in that area. And you can see what happens when I didn't use the block on the underside. See the tear out that happened? It just exploded, especially because this is softwood. And then see how much cleaner it was when I actually used that block to stop that tear out. So now, make sure you're clean. Make sure you don't have anything that could impede it. We can get rid of our tape now on both sides just to make sure. I want to make sure I can see any gaps and fix them if need be. And then bring the breadboard end in nice and tight. And you can see you've got that nice tight joint. I have the squeeze out here. And now it's time for your pegs. We've elongated the hole here, so sliding this down and through, it would defeat the purpose if we glued the whole peg. What we want to do is, if you look at this hole, if you will, from the right side, or the depth, what I want to do is that our tenon is pretty much, say around here, right? So our tenon is in here. We just want to glue, we don't want to glue in the tenon area, we just want to glue up here to this side. So that way it stays and doesn't get pooped out, so to speak, over time, because the expansion and contraction will push an old peg out. You've seen it in old barns where all of a sudden you'll look up at the timber frame and those pegs are either gone or wedged out because of that expansion and contraction. So now, if you're going to use a peg in your project, it can't be a softer wood than the wood that you're using. It needs to be strong. And in this case, this is poplar. This is stronger than the pine that's here. I would recommend either walnut or oak or poplar. And in this case, all I'm going to do is I kind of rough it. And this is where using the apron helps, because you can take some residual glue off there. So I just put a little bit at that tip and I run my finger around so it'll just grab it. So then I just basically get rid of the glue on the bottom. And now I can slowly put it in, give it a little twist. I feel underneath and I just keep twisting it. And I want to make sure it's sort of flush underneath. Now I can cut it off. So for me, I just basically can run it like this. Sometimes it's helpful to use your finger or your fingers to keep it flat and work your way around like this. And just use your fingers to keep it flat across the material. Voila. And you can see it's not marred across the surface. I'll show you on this one, if you tilt it, what can happen. Now, some people will try to bend it and twist it like this. And when you're doing that, see that you'll start to cut those lines across like that. Now, all this will get sanded off, so it's not the end of the world, but get into a good habit when you're using a flush cut saw or a back saw like this. You basically just keep your fingers and make sure you're staying nice and flat. Now this one, because it's the center plug, we can glue the whole thing. Again, twist. Sometimes they're a little tighter, and you give it that whack. Voila. Final one. Voila. There you go. Breadboard end, you can sand that up. Now, one thing to take into consideration when you're doing this is cutting these ends. Those can be done 17,000 different ways a Sunday. For me personally, I like to just take the back saw, I put my finger on it, and I'll just, because I have it out, I just start to chop them. I chop them off by hand. And this will have to be sanded, obviously. All right, so when you get close, just be careful so you're not chipping out anything. So there, it's really flush right now. But be aware, over time, this will expand and contract. Thus, this breadboard end will not get longer. So you will sometimes have the table be proud of your breadboard end, or you'll have the breadboard end be proud of your table. That is just the way it is. That's because you're taking pieces of wood at different angles, and thus the expansion and contraction. So you're done. Raise your hands, be happy. Go grab yourself a Guinness.